Good evening. I'd like to open the 8th meeting of fiscal year 2019 of the Milton Planning Board. I'm Cheryl Tagayas, the chair. To my left,
Rich Beeler, member.
Denny Swenson, member.
Brian Furs, member.
Lauren Masser, assistant town planner.
William Clark, planning director.
okay, and
Julia.
Julia. Julia, you're not at the table with us as you usually are.
You want to sit next to me? You don't have to.
Okay, so I want to at first announce that the public hearing, the continuation of 333 Brush Hill Road, is going to be open and then immediately continued until our meeting next week. So if there's anyone here who is here for that, you're welcome to stay, but that won't be a topic on our agenda tonight. Now, as far as administrative items, our next meeting dates, as I said, next week, November 8th. And then we all get a nice Thanksgiving holiday break, so we'll be back on November 29th, December 13th, and then January 3rd, 10th, and 24th. Julia circulated meeting minutes. Julia, I think one of them was executive session, so I don't think we can approve those in open session, so we'll have to address those at another time. But we had,
There was
no?
one that was the pre-town meeting.
Yes, we have that. That was what date again?
September 27th.
Okay, so we have September 27th, and then the pre-town meeting was October 22nd. Okay, did everybody get a chance to review the minutes?
And the 25th, October 25th went out today, but you guys.
Right. So the 27th, they originally went out. I made some amendments. That is what got most recently circulated, right? So does anybody need additional time on those? Are we ready to approve the minutes or make additional amendments?
I'm ready, but April's not here, so she's the secretary.
Okay, good point. She's here. She's all right. Just in the nick of time for the minutes, April.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so we're talking about September 27th and October 22nd. All right, so I'll take a motion to approve then.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, great. Next is citizen speak. Is there anyone here who would like to speak to the board on a matter that is not on our agenda? Okay, seeing none, we will. I just want to also say that we're going to start the public hearings after we address one old business item. So even though Thomas Nursery is on the schedule at 7:05, we will first take old business discussion of 40R zoning for East Milton Square, Adams Court. Mr. Corcoran?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. I understand it matters before you, at least from a scheduling perspective, and I think at this point, given some significant amount of internal work and conversation that's going on with the Falcone family, that the time is here to take the foot off the gas pedal, perhaps, and not try to achieve a zoning outcome for town meeting in February. So I know that that was a lot of work looming in front of the board in the next couple of months. They are actively engaged in conversations with a couple of potential buyers who, if the property is purchased or is put under agreement, will certainly want to change potentially the nature of the development, how it would be developed, what processes would be followed. So I think at this point, knowing that the Falcones are not prepared to advance something, in a very short period of time between now and, probably the end of the month to have some level of zoning ready to go, they're requesting that the board step back. We appreciate the effort, the time that the board has put into it, other boards have put into it, but I think probably in the really to save everybody's sanity. If anything else, it's a good idea to step back at this time. I do understand that there's a potential discussion about the traffic work that was done. It's probably a good idea to have it, whether it's next week or at another time, because of it really does take a broad look at traffic in East Milton, and it's certainly worth the board having discussion about. So.
Okay, so I'll just provide a little more update from the planning board's perspective. The traffic analysis that Ned referenced is a peer review of the traffic study that was prepared for the, I guess, the initial project that proposed by the Falcones, with also an analysis of how that traffic study would be impacted by the most recent proposal, which was from July, and then also takes a look at what impact it might have if it were all commercial space, if it were retail, some combination of office and some medical office. So that information is going to be presented to us next week by the traffic engineer. Then the other thing is that the planning department has a proposal. Funds were approved out of the master plan implementation funds for Metropolitan Area Planning Council to do a study for a 40R district in East Milton Square. They were made aware of the ULI, or the Urban Land Institute Technical Assistance Panel, so we call it the ULI TAP. It's a tool that we think a great tool. There's professionals who volunteer through the ULI who we applied for that, and we were selected. We applied in the summer, I think, via April, and Lauren's work on that, but they weren't able to get us on the schedule until January 10th. So we will have a presentation of their work, which will focus on East Milton Square. In a similar way, they did a study of Central Ave and Milton Village before zoning was done in those districts. So MAPC feels as if they can do some of the work before the ULI TAP, and that they should wait for completing their work until after that TAP. So it looks like we'll be getting into January in terms of those two analyses. Further, there's some additional scope of work that the traffic engineer has suggested would be beneficial in East Milton Square to do, and the funds weren't available for that. So I have had a conversation with the chair of the select board about seeking funds for that through the warrant committee, so that we can further the traffic study analysis, so that once we do get to that January timeframe, we can have as much information as possible. Yes?
I was just going to say, so I think the original idea was that we were going to look at kind of like an overlay at the same time anyway, so we can still continue to do all of this.
Right.
Anyway, okay, good.
Right, so if the decision is to proceed with an overlay, then even if the property is sold, someone could come forward and make a proposal underneath, to follow that overlay. Or they could look at it and say, will you think about some other kind of zoning or something else? But in the meantime, I think we've decided that it was worth looking at for East Milton Square. Generally, an overlay district, whether it's 40R or takes some other form, is, I think, to be determined, in part informed by those analyses. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ned?
Can I add one
Oh, yes.
request? Late this afternoon, we got a email from Jim Heffernan, who's one of the co-chairs for the ULI TAP, requesting a snow date. Should the 10th be snowing?
Yeah.
So
Probably a good idea.
their suggestion is same day, 1 or 2 weeks out. So it would be the 10th is the date we chose, so it would be the 17th or the 24th.
24th is out. Christmas Eve.
No, we're talking about January.
Oh, sorry.
The 24th is when we have a planning board meeting scheduled already. So
Yes.
we would say the 24th then, I
Yeah.
would say.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right, then we will open the continuation of the public, sorry? Oh, thank you, Ned. The A. Thomas Nursery special permit. Marion McKettrick, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
And we're glad to have you back. And Mr. Thomas, we're glad to have you back too. Excuse me, it's the wrinkly paper. Okay. So, Marion, did you want to address us first?
Well, I can tell you what's happened, if anything, from my perspective. I did get one communication from Danny Swenson asking what waivers were being requested of the bylaw, and that issue came up in our discussion last week. So I did respond to that and indicate that there were two waivers, and one was, when I did finally really study the bylaw, I did find that there was one section that said the hours were 8 o'clock to 6 p.m. for heavy equipment loading and unloading. And we're asking for our blanket hours of 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. for this site. So that the bylaw actually has those hours, and we would have to ask for a waiver in order to receive the existing hours of 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. The argument for the waiver would be, as I explained last week, these are hours that have been in place for more than 10 years. The neighbors have not complained about noise, and they seem very satisfied with the present operation. Furthermore, this site is on Route 28, and the traffic is intense and very, very noisy. A lot of truck traffic and regular commuter traffic, particularly in the morning at that 7 to 8 a.m. time. So that we don't think it would make any difference, you know, if you open at 7, I mean, if you restricted the hours to 8, it would be an inconvenience to the business because they've been operating with these hours, but it wouldn't be a benefit to the neighbors because the noise is already there. So for the hours, we would request that you consider waiving that requirement and just allowing that additional hour. The other waiver relates to the location of fencing and screening. The bylaw calls for locating fencing at a certain distance from the lot line and providing screening 30 feet, within 30 feet from the lot line. The screening and fencing at the Thomas site, again, has been in place since the 2002 site plan approval, or anyway, at least for 10 years. And it has been kept in place, but it's been improved. On the right-hand side, Mr. Thomas added a berm, evergreen trees, and a fence, and they've grown up and they're really thick now. You can't see through them at all. On the left-hand side, there are evergreen trees and a fence, but the fence is located on the lot line. It's not set back. And in the rear of the property, there's permanently protected open land that belongs to the Animal Rescue League. It cannot be developed, and all there is in the back is an electric fence right on the lot line. So that does not conform to the requirements of the bylaw, and so for the location of those fences, we would request that you waive the bylaw requirement of the setback. The other reason to say that we would like to do that is that the setback requirement, at least my impression has been that one reason for it has been noise reduction. So the same discussion or argument applies here that applied for the loading times, which is that it's a very noisy area, and moving the fence and the trees some distance would not be likely to change the noise situation for this neighborhood on either side of the site. And the neighbors have not only not asked for changes, they've indicated that they would like the site to remain as it is because it seems to be working well. They don't want changes made. So I would ask for those two waivers if the board is willing to do it. Of course, it's a decision of the planning board. And I did write a couple of draft decisions, in fact, several, one of which I sent over today. I was waiting for John Flynn's opinion to come back, which it did. So I think the latest one I sent, which I think is number 5, corresponds more or less to what he said, but the board may want to study what he said and incorporate that into the way it's written. So these are just drafts, and they're provided to the planning board to sort of help with writing the decision. I'm happy to work on a draft more if you want to have me do that, or the board, or a board member could take the draft and finalize it for the board. So that's my report for what's happened in the last week.
Okay. Yes, Debbie?
I did have one question. So if the board granted that waiver on the difference in traffic, and going forward in a year or two, neighbors came forward and said they don't like those hours, currently they're fine with them, but going forward, what would be the remedy at that point? Or would it be, well, the permit's been signed and that's that?
Well, in terms of before the renewal, so there's definitely an opportunity at the renewal time, which would be in 3 years.
Okay.
I don't know that there's any mechanism in there for the interim period before 3 years. Bill, do you? No, right? None?
So they have to wait 3 years and then, okay, that's fine.
The only comment I would make is if there were a change in the operation that somehow increased the problem, and that the neighbor's view of a remedy was something like that, then that could become a complaint to the building commissioner, and then that would be taken to the Board of Appeals or possibly back to the planning board. But so there's a mechanism, but in between the renewal periods, it would have to be for something that appeared to not conform to what's required. Change, increase noise for some reason beyond what existed in 2012 and exists today. It's the same operation as 2012. But
So-
I think it's a
right.
good question, but I think 3 years would be the likely time that you would ask for something different.
Okay, thank you.
Remember, Denny, that they wouldn't be allowed to increase the business operations there. So in other words, no additional trucks, no expanded hours, things like that, under the permit. If they sought to do that, they'd have to seek to do that through an amendment or through waiting till the renewal period.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Brian?
I might have a question in a minute. I'm looking something up, so you
Okay.
can come back to me.
Okay, Rich? Everyone did get a copy of Town Council John Flynn's opinion today. It arrived by email, so if you didn't get a chance to review it, he did find that the applicant, I guess it was a question of successor and interest question, right? Sort of a legal term, and he found that they did qualify under that, and the legal language is there to look at. Brian, did that give you enough time yet?
So I know I'm trying to find the right bylaw for this, and I'm having a hard time doing it in the copy that I have with me, unfortunately. Do you have a copy of it, Bill?
Don't.
Okay.
I think it was given to us actually at the last meeting, right?
Last meeting.
I know, I
have
know
it
exactly
then.
where it is on my desk.
I have it there.
Oh, they have a copy of here? Perfect, I do have that.
Yeah, it's in the bound.
I can just add a little bit more comment on the successor of interest issue while you're looking for that, and that is that the applicant name that has to be named in the permit is Thomas Realty Trust, Inc. I'm sorry, Thomas Realty Trust, not Inc. And I wrote to the planning board after I filed this application, asked them to add that applicant, with having this in mind. The opinion did say that the board could grant the permit also to Andrew Thomas and Sons, Inc., which is the corporation that operates the nursery, and that it might be a benefit to the town to hold them responsible as well for the terms of the permit, but that would be up to the planning board.
And is your client amenable to that, Marion?
Yes?
Okay.
I discussed it with him today. I mean, I didn't have the opinion until today, so
Right.
actually just before the meeting, but
You didn't find it yet?
So I can't find the bylaw. I know that the bylaw allows us to provide a waiver for the hours of operation to push it back to 7 a.m. That's a specific provision in the bylaw.
It was, that's right.
So I'm just looking, I was trying to find a reference in the bylaw or an allowance that would provide the opportunity to give a waiver on the setback. And it may just be our general planning board bylaw that we can provide a waiver, and that's probably sufficient, but I just wanted to see if there was any specific
It's
reference.
attached to the memo that Lauren handed out last week. So
Okay.
do you have the memo, or you can take mine?
Yeah, I'll just take yours.
Okay.
The only other comment I would make as far as the fencing goes is that that was part of, it appears to have been part of the site plan approval in 2002. And you'll remember that that site plan approval was a decision by the, review by the planning board that was required because this was a business. And whether it was nursery and landscaping business, even it was recognized from the earliest time a permit was issued for this site that there was some landscaping going on. And so I don't think it necessarily means that you have to follow that, but I think the board should give some weight to the fact that this business has changed its site design, it has worked well, and there have been no complaints, and that the planning board itself approved this design in 2002, which might be different from various other sites. I mean, every single site that this could possibly apply to has different factors, there's no question. In this case, that's sort of unusual that that site plan review took place was because they wanted to build a new greenhouse building. And I think that, you know, if there needed to be a change because there was a problem, the bylaw certainly tells you to do it and provide some guidance as to where the fencing should be. But I don't think there needs to be a change in this case. Anyway.
I'll look it up before we sign it. It's fine.
Okay. So if we think we have adequate information, we could close the public hearing. So I'll take a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So I would say, from my point of view, I have no trouble agreeing to the requested waivers. But I'd be happy to hear what other board members have to say. And then I'd say we would need to take the draft language and review it and then discuss it perhaps at our next meeting, depending upon how much is already on the agenda, maybe the last meeting in November. So Rich, do you have any concerns?
Nothing more than that.
Okay. Denny?
No further.
Okay. April?
I support the application.
Okay. Brian, you're still working on
I'm
it,
all
but
set.
you're all set? Okay. All right, so, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to just open and continue 333 Brush Hill Road. So I'll take a motion to continue that to the 8th.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, now we will open the public hearing for the special permit for Wolcott Woods. And welcome this big model.
Good evening, planning board members and staff. My name is Jack Dawley. I represent Northland Residential Corporation in the application before you, which is a special permit application for what we commonly refer to as the Carberry property. I'm here tonight with Ned Corcoran, Alan Ockman, and Deb Keller. And the purpose of our presentation tonight will be to provide a thorough overview of how we got here tonight and the application before you. We have other team members that we did not bring tonight that will be available to focus on topic-specific matters, architecture, stormwater, traffic, landscaping, and the like over the next 4, 5, 6 meetings, whatever is necessary, so as not to, drag on these hearings. We're trying to manage the information in a way that is easy to present, that we can have our team members available, and allow you to focus in a deep dive on the various topics. As questions come up, we'll park them, if we can't answer them in the night at hand, and try to take them up in a subsequent meeting or meetings. One of the things that I pledged to our team is that you've heard and seen a lot of Ned and/or I over the last 2+ years with respect to this property. It is really, the work that is before you is the result of the hard work and expertise of my team members, whether it be our traffic consultant, our land planner and landscape architect, our civil engineer, our architect, our tree preservation specialist, or our historic consultant. It will be they who speak to you and present the material because they are the experts and they are the ones that were charged with putting together a plan that comports with all of that which I or Ned represented up to town meeting in May of 2017, and that which the zoning bylaw and development agreement that was enacted at that time calls for. They are best-in-class professionals in each of their respective fields, and I think that it's only appropriate for me and Ned to allow them to present the design and the process they went through to derive the application that's before you. I have to thank the chair of the planning board, who was a member of the planning board previously, who called for the development of a 2-scale model. It's something that is not often done. I've done it twice in my professional career of 35 years. It is a very powerful tool to allow all of us and the general public to understand what pages and pages and pages of drawings in small scale and small print mean. And I think it will be an instructive tool throughout the process for folks to understand why the plan has taken the shape that it has. So I'll stop talking, hand the talking stick to Alan Ockman. He has an overview. Periodically, Deb and/or Ned will jump in. We're going to try to keep our presentation to somewhere around 45 minutes, a little bit of Q&A, and then come back next week.
So it makes sense for us to come there so
Probably.
we can look behind us?
Probably.
Okay, thank you.
It's harder to look at you all when you're spread around. That's all right. But as Jack said, it's a pleasure. My name is Alan Ackerman from Ryan Associates, Landscape Architecture and Planning. It's a pleasure to begin this process tonight. Jack assembled the design team on site for our first site walk, I believe, in either the last week of November or the first couple weeks of December 2015. So we're going on roughly 3 years here of looking at the site, walking the site with each other and with you all and neighbors and abutters and town committees and advisory panels. So it's good to be here. The mistake we would make would be to get ahead of ourselves in the conversation. So as we put the talk together tonight, we want to spend about half of our time really backing up and talking about how we got here. It'd be easy to start with the model and say, here it is, please thank us. But it doesn't work that way. And we would miss out a lot of the conversation if we did that. So we want to start back with where we began, with the property. And this is a little dark from my angle. Hope you can see it all right, it'll get lighter. The property is 47 acres. A lot of us are really familiar with it by now. Bordered by the Blue Hills. Uphill, north note is down in this direction. We all know the site with Canton Avenue being our primary interaction with the site if we're not doing more than passing by. So north is always going to be down that way. We're down this way, further down Canton Avenue at Town Hall, going south out to 128 in that direction. So the Carberry Lane neighborhood, the abutter here at 1770, abutting property at 1776 Canton Ave, and then the Blue Hills Reservation extends along that side. About 1,600 feet of frontage on Canton Ave. So the existing conditions, backing up from the aerial, include the 47 or so acres, the 3 existing driveways that we're familiar with, the scenic, poetic driveway that goes along the Manor House lawn to the Manor House, equally beautiful driveway that curves through the beech trees up to the Walcott House, and then the straight-on shot into the property that goes up to the carriage house and the more of the farm working structures of the property. And then the Manor House lawn, the Devon's Field, the Woodlands upper field, an intermittent stream that cuts through the site here. 16 or so structures, depending on how you count them, down to the smallest garden shed. So as we know the site, coming from town, out Canton Avenue, we just passed the driveway going up to the Manor House, and through the trees, the wooded buffer, we see this meadow peeking through on this lawn, sunlit beyond. That's how we know it if we've passed it by for years. The vantage point there in the area on the corner. Sorry, that's a little dark. Once you're inside, it looks like that, with the house up here up the hill and this big lawn that comes down the hill from the front porch of the house. And I think from the first time that the design team was on the site, the commitment was there not to do anything with this lawn or that portion of frontage along Canton Avenue, and that the house would be retained. And the final plan, as we'll talk about, it's 2 units, 2 condominium units, but it stays in its present siting and appearance. Continuing up Canton Avenue, the experience is repeated. Now there's a stone wall along Canton Avenue. Here's the middle driveway. And again, we see a sunlit field through the trees. And depending on your angle, you see Devon's house, which is about there. So the view is about there. Devon's house is here. That field extends all the way up the hill through the center of the property. And again, early on, the impulse was clear to come into the site for the project, for whatever we would do here, through the middle of the site. This straight shot, though, never felt right for the character of the site or for how we wanted to present the project. So very early on, the move was made to shift the driveway, to close the middle driveway, revegetate it, continue the stone wall, and a few 100 or 200 feet up the Canton Avenue to create a new driveway opening, flare the stone walls in, subtle project signage on the capstones, a little more than that, and then the road would arc into the property here like this. Once you're through the initial tree line there where the new driveway is, you're into another clearing, a smaller clearing than the first 2. The third one is smaller here. The upper portions of the site are screened by dense young pines. But you see through here a shot through to the Devon's Field. And the grade works nicely to come in with the new entry there, up that little hollow, come through about here. Devon's house is just off frame here, and the entry road then going through that little swale saddle in the roll of the hill down the Canton Avenue to come in with the entry drive there. Again, an early design move or impulse that quickened as the process continued. Up into the site, there's all these other features that immediately strike somebody visiting. The intermittent brook, which, again, sorry, the picture's a little washed out, but in most of its course, it comes right down through here. It's stone-lined, hard-bottomed, a farm brook drainage device with one crossing currently roughly here. Significant trees populate the site, especially in areas around the Walcott House, the Manor House, and then remnants of farm walls, farm lanes. In this picture here taken in this tree line here. All things to preserve and celebrate and take inspiration from as the design evolved. In the upper portion of the site, there's it's an upper field, probably at one time more connected with some of the upper fields that were originally part of the farm holdings that are now part of the Blue Hills. But there, the thought, because we're farther from Canton Avenue and some of the view corridors, that there would be a place for new homes where tree removals wouldn't be necessary and where those homes would front these existing wooded edges, which are dense at their edges and more open beyond. It's a prominent feature up in this corner of the site. And then in off the Manor House driveway, there's a feature we haven't talked much about. Those of you who are more familiar with the site know it's there. It's this, it's called an esker. It's a glaciated feature of a glaciated landscape where meltwater off a glacier lays out these winding gravel ridges, and that extends down that way. And again, it's not something that that we'd ever want to touch, and it's part of the open space. And then the buildings to retain, what buildings that we're striking from the start, and it was an evolving process. As I said, the Manor House from the start was a structure that everybody was committed to retaining, along with the Walcott House. The Walcott House is so named for the Governor Walcott and his family who lived there. The Manor House is where is the first property, parcel that the Carberry family purchased. It was built in 1875 for the Floyd family. The Walcott House has gone through several iterations. This pink stucco characteristic came about when the house was reconfigured, most likely around 1930, 34, which is about contemporaneous with the building of the Devens house. The Devens, Charlie Devens was a New York Yankee in the 30s with Babe Ruth. Grew up in Milton, and his would-be father-in-law, a member of the Walcott family, reportedly didn't want a ball player for a son-in-law, so he quit the Yankees and came back to Milton. Played with Babe Ruth in the series where Babe Ruth called his home run shot. So all that site walking, visits to the site with neighbors, abutters, town board members, began to be codified over time through a variety of sort of initial site planning studies, options for laying out circulation, and the home sites. And as we went through all those things in these previous slides that we wanted to save, the lawns, the fields, the view corridor along Canton Avenue, those began to get numbers and meanings assigned to them. A 75-foot no disturb zone along Canton Avenue, a 250-foot no building zone. In an earlier iteration, there were more homes in this zone associated with the Devens house, and that, as talks continued, pushed to a 550 no-build zone for new construction other than some homes that we'll talk about associated with the Devens home here. Side setbacks, 125 along the sides, no new roads closer to the side setbacks. 175, no buildings closer to the side setbacks, side property lines, and then the 50 and 100 for the same restrictions across the rear property line setbacks. Equally, the driveway, the driveway now will only serve as the driveway for 1776. The Manor House driveway remains intact, but is a fire lane egress way with a gate for the event of emergency access. So all of that pretty much got us to May 2017, the town meeting for the Great Estate Planned Unit Development Zoning article, which was accompanied by this concept plan and the basic outlines of what the Great Estates Planned Unit development allowed for were sort of bullet pointed here, sort of a greatest hits highlights list. 54 total homes on site. The 3 buildings to be retained, the Manor House, Devon's, and the Walcott House. And the new construction would be limited to single-family, 2-family, or 3-unit buildings, all under condominium ownership. The concept plan showed all duplex units in new construction except for 2 singles at Devon's in the concept plan, and for 2 homes in the Manor House, 1 in Walcott and 1 in Devon's. And the zoning also outlined the 6 affordable units that were to be built off-site or converted off-site. The setbacks, as we the previous slide highlighted, the matter of relocating the driveway there, and a 60% minimum open space requirement, here shown in green. The DCR trail access was a piece of the zoning, a walking trail behind the wall along Canton Avenue, tree protection retention measures, and that the overall project would be age restricted for the on-site units, not for the off-site affordable units. So that was May 2017. As the site plan evolved, and this is how it looks today in the model and in the submittal documents, the open space requirement also is a further sort of really shaping characteristic of the site plan in terms of both in sort of in parallel to the setbacks and the restricted areas as outlined by the setbacks, the need to meet the 60% or 28-acre minimum open space characterizes and shapes the site. So here depicted in green is the open space that would be protected by conservation restriction, and that those areas would be managed as meadows, woodland, wetlands, the historic lawn, which can be mowed. Allowed uses in those areas are greatly prescribed. Allowed uses do though include the walking path, like this one here, behind the wall, some passive recreation, and the ability to run site utilities through the open space and subsurface or open drainage. So the overall site plan as proposed, again, the unit counts, it evolved from the showing simply duplexes in the concept plan to a mix of 2-unit and single-unit buildings. So there are 19 duplexes. We're talking the new construction now, the 50 units in new construction, and 12 single-unit buildings. And as supported by the zoning, 2 singles associated with the Devon's house, and then singles interspersed to break up the rhythm of the plan, but also to adapt and conform to the site as relates to setbacks and grading and drainage. And So as we moved into the unit planning and considering how the homes are laid out, we had the site, as it moves through the site, we associate, and you'll see this in the architectural submission, the architectural design, the home design, the character of these clusters of homes relate to features of their surroundings, whether they relate to the Walcott House, the Manor House, Devon's, the Woodlands or the Carberry Trail area, or the area across the stream. Each will take on an individual character so that the overall plan and progression through this site design takes us up around the project. So the summary, the whole process, again, this started back with walking the site in 2015, getting to town meeting in spring of 2017, and throughout that and since continuing with site design and meetings with town boards and community members to produce the resulting site plan, characterized several times now and again here. So that's where we've come since 2017 with the concept plan here to the left and the current plan to the right. So overall, if you squint, it's a very similar plan. If you look more closely, the rhythm of the buildings, the singles and the doubles, the arc of the street, additional shared eyebrow driveways to break the line along the street, all add up to a plan that does everything that we really felt and knew about the site as we began. We're protecting a substantial view corridor along Canton Avenue, important architectural resources, natural resources with the stream, wooded areas, and really treating the site as the important one that it is. So that's really how we got to today. And what we hope to do, as Jack said, in the upcoming hearings is to break down the discussion around each of those topics. So utilities and site drainage, traffic, architectural detail, landscape planning detail, and the like. Tonight, we want to give sort of an overview of site design in terms of drainage, utilities, the traffic studies and mitigation, along with sort of the character of the architectural vision. So with that, Deb. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Good evening. My name is Deb Keller with Merrill Engineers and Land Surveyors. To briefly go over the drainage and utilities, I'll start with the stormwater management facilities on the site. The development itself is collected through a closed drainage system running along the roadways and bisecting the roadway here through deep sump hooded catch basins, drain manholes, and piping down to either the meadow drainage. Oops, my thing is dying. Can I borrow this? This way. Okay, apologize. Open meadow basins or subsurface drainage facilities to attenuate and treat stormwater runoff from the site. The sewer collection system, again running through the roadways, will be tied into the municipal sewer through a cross-country collection system down to Brush Hill Road, where there's currently a connection to the existing municipal system. Then water services, again, ideally looping through the project, looking further into the existing systems along Canton Ave and on Carberry Lane, there's a potential, and we're working with the town now to verify and confirm whether this is possible, of looping the water main that comes up Carberry Lane through potential easement here, up and around, up here, up and around throughout the site and coming back down through and tying into the new water main in Canton Ave. Again, if this turns out to not be a possible connection, we will loop the water main through the site itself back from Canton Ave back to Canton Ave. All of the electrical and cable utilities will be provided underground. I think that's a quick general overview of the utilities for the project. I'm going to pass it to Ned to talk about traffic.
So very quickly, we had a traffic analysis prepared and submitted. Significantly, we did a couple of things. We ran counts based on what we think are 4 similar projects. Quisset Brook, which has 56 units. It's a condominium project on Unquity Road. Pine Tree Brook, which is Home Inc., which has 98 units. And then 2 projects that Northland has done in Belmont. We took those traffic counts, were averaged for an average rate of traffic, and then multiplied that out over the course of 24 hours. We come up with a total traffic impact of 386 trips per day. In the peak hours, which is the significant time, is 28 trips in the AM peak, 29 trips in the PM peak. It's really a non-traffic generator of any significant degree. Having said that, next one, we know that Canton Avenue and Blue Hill Avenue are subject to significant volumes of traffic, mostly cut-through traffic, and particularly in the PM, with traffic trying to get through Milton and out to 128. This intersection at Brush Hill Road, Blue Hill Avenue, narrows from 2 lanes to 1. It's fed by Canton Avenue here, it's fed here, and it's fed further back. And so we know that the state has initiated a plan. They've got a $25 million project that they're planning to advertise, we think, in 2022, that is going to widen 138, include some shared bike and ped paths and other things. But because of that, we don't see a capability of adding into the state's process. What we think we can do and what we're planning to do is present ideas for improvements to Route 138, to Canton Avenue itself. I should note that we are now tipped the plan upside down, that this is the upper area of the property and Canton Avenue is here. We met twice, August 1 and October 1, with neighbors to talk about ideas. We met with town staff to talk about ideas, basically to improve signage. The basic plan is to introduce traffic calming and other measures to Canton Avenue itself to make Canton Avenue safer. It is quite a downhill run. It's fairly flat along this section of the frontage of the property with good visibility in and out here. But as you pass the center point of the property, it's quite a run downhill, and then it winds itself down and around as it heads towards Town Hall. One of the concerns raised was to put in a blind drive ahead sign as you approach the Bartol estate, particularly this driveway, which is skewed to 128, skewed to Canton Avenue. We looked at these radar signs showing your actual speed as you're approaching and proposing in each direction. I found There's one near my house at the other end of Canton Avenue that's really quite effective as you head down the hill towards Glover School. It wakes you up if you started to get beyond the speed limit. So some of those, improving the signage with respect to how Canton Avenue twists and turns. And then lastly, some sort of a much better warning sign regarding the approach to this turn from Canton Avenue to Brush Hill Road, particularly at night with people who are not familiar with that turn. This property has seen significant damage over time, broken fencing, stone wall, they've got bollards out in front. And so we thought a bright yellow sign with a speed warning that shows right turn here. We since I've got a call from one of the neighbors suggesting that maybe we should turn that into stop signs, one in each direction. That's a little bit more complexity to that. We've introduced that concept in conversation with town staff, and we expect to be before the Traffic Advisory Committee with respect to that, but that's a bigger idea. Whichever way it nets out, whether it's this type of sign or some stop signs here, we're somewhat ambivalent. We want to do the right thing, and so these are the sets of ideas we think make the most sense and have been preliminary presented to the Traffic Advisory Committee for their review.
Hello again. I just wanted to mention one more thing. Since we've filed our submission, it has gone out for peer review. We have received a peer review from the town's consultant. We've actually sat down and reviewed it with them and are working on a response to comments for the plan set as well as the application.
And as I listened to Ned speak, I noticed that we ended up with 2 north arrows on this graphic somehow. Trust this one, not that one. Sorry about that. So Jim Valecco isn't here tonight, our project architect, but we do want to give a sort of a highlight sort of the architectural character that has been developed and submitted for the project, characterizing the new homes. And the takeoff for that, again, is back with the 3 homes to be retained, the Devons, Manor, and Walcott houses. And the houses, new homes that are nearest to them echo or relate in a direct or indirect way as homage or as sort of to indicate sort of a secondary outbuilding like quality to the grandness of some of these buildings. So the Devons house, the first house up the hill as we come into the neighborhood, is a clapboard house with, with a low hip roof with brick ends on either side, with a 2-car garage facing the entrance drive that currently exists and will be off the entrance drive, much in a similar way to the way the current driveway has this eyebrow driveway that separates the house from the existing and future realigned road behind a arc of trees. Changes to the exterior character are minimal. The rear elevation receives a patio door instead of a single door to access an outdoor terrace. But other than that, the overall character remains the same. The homes that are clustered behind the Devons house in the zoning bylaw and the concept there is to treat them. This view here is taken off the corner of the house, so here, again, well off the main road, but as you come around, to treat those homes in a way that's outbuilding-like. So we've picked up on some of the qualities that are located throughout the site for those structures, breaking down the massing, dropping the roof volumes down. The majority of the house, the living space on the first floor with second floor spaces in the roof volume. And again, I won't want to get too far into Jim's territory. Again, that view blown up, taken well off the main road, off behind the Devon's house. The Walcott house, the pink stucco house with the slate roof. Again, minimum changes to the exterior. It currently has a freestanding small garage a little ways from the house. We're proposing adding a two-car garage and a mudroom connector, removing sort of a 70s or 1980s small greenhouse addition here. I'm not sure if that was visible in any of these plans. There it is. So the garage would be off this side, behind the house, off there. Just go back to the site plan or the model. You know, we're endeavoring to imitate some of that circle drop-off, front door prominence in the new land plan. The existing brick wall in the backyard stays. And again, a larger door to access a backyard terrace into that garden area. Take note as we flip through the different dormer styles. So as we relate the homes in the Walcott area to Walcott, material palettes, dormer styles, working in the site plan not to sort of oppose the front door with garages, but to break that with two singles. So these units would be lower slung, smaller volumes. The manor house, again, from the historic lawn area, that facade remains as you see it. Needs a new roof and siding and the like. The pool goes away. Historically, this was the front door here. There was a farm lane that came up the tree line along Devon's Field. Carriages came around here, around a drop-off circle, and this was the working side of the house. Today, as it's existed for a long while in the life of the Carberry family and before them, that is how you see the house when you drive up. Modifications to the manor house include turning it into a 2-unit home, whether it's 1 unit here, 2nd unit here, and some adaptation of the 3rd floor remains to be seen, or if it's split vertically, so 1 unit, 2 units is still being fully fleshed out. But a garage addition there, so that's that sleeping porch area here, with a garage to the side there, and then a garage turned there off that wing here. So kind of around the corner there. Again, sort of the language of some of these features you'll see echoed in some of the proposed architecture for homes nearby. Material choices. Taking sort of the significant buildings on site, including the carriage house building, which is probably the most prominent outbuilding on site, and using some of the new architecture to echo and to replicate and continue on some of the agrarian qualities of the Great Estates property and heritage here. Using side entries where the road turns and you see the side as much as you see the front. The side becomes prominent. A side front door with porch becomes important, depending on what's across the street, what's happening on the corner, whether the roof is laid back, or you get a full gable end. Jim is playing with around the site, and you'll see it in the model, different dormers appearing in different ways, depending on where we are, what we're looking at, how the building is addressed to the street. And so that's the project. We want to take some time to answer any questions or elaborate on anything that comes to mind.
All right, maybe before we take our seats, let's take a look at the model. Since you mentioned it was my suggestion, or almost insistence, that one of these be produced for this, how about telling us how the three-dimensional model helped inform the land planning? Because one of the reasons we suggested it was we wanted to limit how much cut there would be to the landscape, to the topography, so that it wouldn't impact as many trees in part, but, you know, so have a lighter touch on the land. So can you just kind of run through where you see how you worked with the topography, and then also where you found some limits, you know, that we put a lot of constraints on, as you said, with setbacks, et cetera? And from what I could see, you ran into a couple of spots where you had to do more cutting than I was hoping you might. So can you run through that for us?
So we can get, you know, a certain distance walking the site and knowing, as I described, where there's a natural draw, you know, in the land that suggests circulation and connection between one part of the site and the next. So we can get a certain distance, you know, with site planning, with walking the site, getting a feel for the site, experiencing the site. We can get we can get a little bit farther with topographic surveys and knowing how to read grading plans and so on, and working cut and fill equations. And then the model, and knowing, you know, we're producing a model and working in stages with the model, really take us the rest of the way. And I think what the model does is, I think it shows us what we know, some ways from those other tools. But what it also does is it gives us the broader context. So we see what we're fitting into, and we're seeing a site that really goes from a low point in the front corner at the first driveway to a high point in this corner, which is about 150 feet of climb, which over 2,200 feet or whatever that is it's a lot, but it's not impossible. But it does, you know, average out to be 10% or more in certain places. So working the road in a few spots was a particular challenge. This part in particular, working the curve and within the setbacks, siting homes along that, cutting in the upper portion, filling in the lower part of the curve.
Are you filling in here that are?
No, those homes are working with the grade.
Okay, so the filling is coming in
Right,
the street?
right. We're cutting a little bit along the street here and filling in the street down along the three buildings there, so that we average out a road gradient that's manageable, acceptable, without running it out even farther or getting into road grades that would challenge safety.
So is that the,
They're all here.
all right, well,
But we'll get to.
we'll get into more of the detail. I'm just, Mr. Walker, we're just going to ask a few questions for explanation, and then we'll be getting into detail in the coming meetings. So is that the only area that you ran into that kind of gradient issue for the road, or is there another area
I
as well?
think this corner here as well, and then a little bit through here, getting from sort of an existing grade point here to there, around this corner and then around there. You agree, Deb?
I would agree. Having fixed points as the Walcott House and trying to match the front grade here, but meeting grade down here means you got 2 points. The best way to get there, if you soften one area, you're going to steepen another. So working with those fixed points and trying to make the best connections throughout the site.
So could you also, in the land planning, point out where the historic homes are here, and then your thoughts about how you group the new buildings around them, like you did in the plan here,
Yep.
but if you don't mind pointing them
Sure.
out in the model?
Sure. So here at the Devon's house, the house is experienced from the street coming up this way. So you look under the trees, you do see the front of Devon's in season. And so the sort of the site design sort of process here is leading up to, in the weeks leading into the town meeting, the site plan and our intention at that point was not to retain the Devon's house. It was to include a neighborhood here that included, I believe, 6 or so duplexes for a total of 12 units in this area. And that's where that 250 line first came from, that we didn't want to be much closer to Canton Avenue than Devon's is existing, as we thought about locating more homes here. As conversations with the town and the abutters progressed, sort of the position that we arrived at together was that Devon's would be retained, so that as the view corridor is experienced, that would stay the same, and that 2 homes could be located in vicinity of Devon's in a sort of a subservient, sort of back behind manner, and that the overall unit count would go from what had been a proposed 58 units on site plan down to a 54 unit plan, and with no reduction to the affordables off-site. So there was a kind of a lot of conversations that took place to do that, to find home for a few more units up here, 3 units here down from the 12, and then the I don't know, call it a loss or a reduction of 4 units overall. And then, so that's one house. So the manor house, as I described, really nothing was ever really contemplated except maybe in the first, sketch, when we put a duplex in the front yard. But that, that was over and done with by, January of 2016. So we really never thought of doing anything seriously down that way. And then the houses behind it, how do they relate? Again, breaking down, I think that the concept plan showed a duplex there, but in the sort of the evolving thinking about the buildings themselves, the relationship with the existing architecture, how can we get those roof volumes down and treat them, again, more like buildings that would echo some of the outbuildings that serve the manor house there. Historically, the 2 properties were really separate. They don't connect. If you go back to our second slide, there's a line here, that that was the Floyd estate, the Carberry house. This was the Walcott property. And then the Walcott house, which now has been had its sort of ceremonial driveway that comes to the circle and flagpole up this way, and a little driveway sneaks by to a freestanding garage around the corner. Our thinking there was to try to, in the front presentation, treat that in a similar way. It's kind of a curious house in the sense that Jim, the architect, kind of calls it a little bit of Bermuda on the Blue Hills in terms of the pink stucco. And this house that from the front could be a very, you know, city urban house. You could put this house hard on a street with a brick gate along a brick wall along the sidewalk, a front door inside of a small courtyard. You walk through the house, and then you're into the courtyard garden beyond. So that's really what we've continued with, and with that house and putting a street across the front, it seemed like a acceptable gesture given the symmetrical nature of the house, the way the house presents, that it wants to stand proudly on the street. And then you come through the front door, and then you're in your private world beyond. And right now, you know, the existing sort of working driveway, or what's worked as a working driveway, for a lot longer than Devon's was there, even as the farm lane came up and served the red farmhouse cluster, the carriage house, the back of house world of the Walcott house. That zone back there is echoed and recreated with the new homes around that remnant of the existing circulation.
So these are retaining walls, or some of them just walls that are landscape walls?
Landscape walls primarily.
Sorry, I can go through these. This is a crossing, a new crossing for the stream. So those would be retaining walls here. There's a retaining wall here due to the grading. You have some retaining wall down here. Again, this is retaining wall due to the stream crossing, and this is in the same location that the existing crossing is today. And then, as you see, all these smaller ones throughout the site are more associated with the homes and, you know, grading around the structures.
So
And
the grading, sorry, the grading around the structures, is that to give them basically a level pad to build on, and then it's sloping off? How many, or what percentage have walkout basements as a result of regrading, or is it mostly as a result of existing grades?
Mostly as a result of existing grades. I don't think we're grading anywhere to create walkouts. So what will happen is that you'll see that generally the streets are on the uphill side of the homes, so that the street is, you know, as close to existing natural grade as possible, and then the home itself and the foundations are retaining as the slope trails away down the site. For those, and then in some cases that's a walkout, sometimes it's a partial daylight, lower level. In other cases, these are patio units. So the walls are typically, as we go around the site, is associated to the buildings. They're on the downhill side of the home, and they allow for incremental grade shifts as we climb up from one home to the next, or to allow a front door, a front path to access the front door, and to create a garden spot along the streetscape.
So you're not looking at having a retaining wall between the residential buildings, right?
No.
Right.
No.
No. So they're just going to slope down between them?
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Okay. And then, would you say that this whole area here, which is kind of the largest concentration of the homes, right, is going to need to be a lot of work done in terms to build this, right? So you really looking at being able to retain any trees in this sort of middle zone in here, existing trees?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I think the
That grove?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So that grove represented here, these large trees are survey located large trees. And we have the tree plan and preservation plan that highlights those and documents those. We do have Yeah, there's substantial trees there that are remaining. So I guess I don't,
So I
when
guess,
you say substantial work,
well, just when you, you know, you create the pads, you create the street, you put the utilities in, you have staging areas. We've seen when you're close to those big trees that there can be a real need to protect them.
Sure.
And I'm just,
Sure.
want to make sure that you've given that some thought in what you're
Yep.
showing that you can preserve there.
Yep. One of our consultants, not represented here tonight, is the folks from Tree Specialist, who are working with us on those plans and will be on site. And one of the, advantages of what you described as how the grade relates to the buildings is that the lower levels do walk out onto natural grade as opposed to digging a full depth cellar below a building. So the excavation impacts are a frost wall versus a full depth foundation next to a tree, which is the same. But in terms of the layback area and the amount of material removed and so on, I would say it's not so substantial. They're sensitive. Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, if I can jump in, I want to go back to your original question. How was the model instructive in the development of the design? I think Alan said it was one of many tools. I would say the most powerful tool along the way, because the model is the sort of the outproduct of, you don't build the model first, you have to do a bunch of design. And so once we had a pretty good idea of the design, we could then release the model builders to start laser cutting it, and we could learn from that. But we probably walked the site with a plan and a profile. Deb was very handy. She brought a profile of the road a couple of times. So as we walked the site, it became very instructive to us in a number of ways. This doesn't work. There you go. Maybe I'm pushing the wrong button. So we probably walked this, 4 or 5 times, pushing and pulling, whether it be grade, whether it be cut, whether it be existing trees. One of our earlier plans had it coming down through here, and once we got out there, we realized there are 3 significant beeches in there and a big sugar maple that are worthy of saying. If you bite the site off in the field with good drawings and a good 1-foot contour survey, you can micro design different areas. And we spent a lot of time. I dragged them through on a tree preservation walk at 90 degrees, and we walked all 47 acres, and I said, we're going to get through it. So we could get up in here, for instance, and see with a plan and on the face of the ground where things were. This stone wall back in here, if I take you out there, you have to search for that existing stone wall. It's overgrown. And that then became instructive of what can or should we do behind it, or what shouldn't we do behind it. There's some utility lines that run up through the middle here and some trees, and the first pass, a junior engineer just, blasted all the drainage and all the sewer and water up through here, and we realized that was not part of the design intent, so it got shifted. So I wouldn't say the model in and of itself was the tool. It was a good base map with 1-foot contours off of which this got built. It was repetitive site walks looking at different elements of the design, whether it be cuts, fills, where, I go back up in here. This area back in here hasn't gotten a lot of attention. There was a suggestion made to break up the linearity of the placement of the homes that's shown on the concept plan dated May. And we got up into that field and realized that there was significant area and grade to work with to develop a little pocket park, pardon me. There was also, get a new battery. We did not want to push further toward Denny in that corner because we started to bump into grade, which then we chased tree clearing, And we had, you know, a very good metric of a stone wall not wanting to be greater than X. So the variety of toggling back and forth, and I would say a really, really careful, long time spent on the ground was probably the most helpful.
And I think if I could add, as I've tried to think about your question, Cheryl, the thing that I wish, we rushed, you know, to make sure that we could have it all here today, all looking like this under plexi. But as I hear your questions, what we should have done is taken it here for the first meeting without the trees on, without the paint on, without the buildings on. Because my experience walking into the model shop when it was raw foam and seeing it just cut. So it's not, doesn't look like this at all. It's kind of a sand colored, high density foam that they cut. And that's all it was. It was just fresh out of the mill. And my fear walking into the shop that day was that, you know, where are the ugly spots going to be, right? Where's Cheryl going to, you know, get us? And what I liked, what I experienced seeing it in that state, which I wish we could show you here, was those spots didn't catch my eye. So we do have retaining walls. We've worked hard to keep those 4 feet or less. So we're not building, you know, what do we call them? Walmart walls, Target walls, you know, Auto Mile walls, you know, whatever the big, you know, we know what they are. Overhead walls are. And I think as we look at the model and we see the way the buildings step and roll with the site, we're pleased with what we were able to do.
I think one of the reasons that we talked about the topography and keeping the retaining walls to a minimum is we wanted that goal to be met about having them kind of tuck into the landscape and not look like they were cut in sort of in a very aggressive way. Other questions? Board members or on the model? We can take a seat. What I did want to suggest is that this model is going to be left here, Bill.
It's going, that's what I just talked to Jack about. We're going to take it tomorrow over to Town Hall. We're going to, I'm not sure if we're putting it in the blute or in the kitchen conference room, but we'll have it at Town Hall for the time being. The early voting has rooms down there compromised, so where to place it for right now, we may have to put it into the kitchen conference room, and we may have to move it out of there and put it back into the blute, but we'll start tomorrow by putting it downstairs at Town Hall. I can't give you the room right now.
Okay, so if members of the public want to come take a look at the model, they can do that during the office hours of the Town Hall?
Yes.
Okay. So process, I know, was something that you've had some process before you've come to us. I know you've met with the Historical Commission. I think you've met with many of the town departments. So can you just give us an overview of what you've done and what you've learned and how those any concerns have been addressed, please?
All right, let's see. You want to go quickly back? I think there's 1 or 2 of those that take a bit more time, so we'll quickly just run through the rest of the list to characterize those.
Okay.
I don't know if Ned, you want to run through this list? Characterize the number of meetings. I don't want to, you probably have a better count.
It's really more about what kind of feedback can you give us from those meetings?
And Ned's been shepherding that,
thank you.
record.
We've had, let's see, we've had 2 neighbor meetings, fairly attended. I wouldn't say heavily, but not sparsely attended. One in August, one in early October. We had a series of meetings with the Historical Commission. The Historical Commission in particular is tasked with commenting on our efforts to maintain the three buildings that were to be maintained and to comment on architecture relative to the dwelling units to be built around them. We met with the Traffic Advisory Committee. We met twice with, we met with individual members of town staff, particularly town engineer Chase, John Thompson and Chase Berkeley with the DPW and town engineer. And we met again with the all-hands meeting of town staff last week with a representative of Stantec, the consultant, to review their comments. The comments that we received were generally pretty, there weren't many significant comments. We have one major comment to address tonight relative to the Historical Commission. But with the exception of that major comment, most of the comments were somewhat minor. Stantec, for example, had some very minor comments about the traffic plan. They agreed with generally with the findings. They had a couple of minor questions about, you know, some conclusions that were drawn, but at the end of the day, the differences were so insignificant that, you know, we think it's fine. They had specific issues, and they issued a report, specific issues with some of the stormwater questions about how we tied conclusions drawn to borings and things like that. There's some work that's being done to button up that.
Now, just on the traffic, did John Thompson and Stantec review the extent to which the traffic study went in terms of intersections, et cetera?
They looked at, let's see, they did two things. One, we established the volumes of traffic that would be generated. Stantec questioned and we can get into this more specifically with Giles and Giles Ham and Vanass, but they thought that a greater number of the traffic coming to and from the site would come more from the south than from the north. They questioned the trip distribution that we came up with. Now, the numbers are not that great because at the end of the day, it's 29 or 28 trips in each of the peak hours, but we're contributing very little traffic in either direction. We didn't specifically say, you know, what happens to traffic when you get, if it's leaving the site in the morning, for example, and goes north towards the center of town, how much of the traffic when it gets to Unquity before it turns off, how much of it turns left on Blue Hill Parkway if it's heading to Boston, how much of it turns right, how much it continues forward up Canton Avenue towards the library, town hall area. That hasn't been broken down. Those numbers presumably would be maximum, you know, in the teens over the course of an hour. So 1 or 2 trips every 3 to 4 minutes, I suppose, was what would contribute in that northbound direction. Similarly, in the southbound direction. We had conversation with John Thompson about whether there are impacts to consider or ideas to consider beyond Unquity Road, but we didn't get pushback on that, and we haven't done any evaluation of things beyond Unquity. We think that the real issues and concerns that we've heard from neighbors and from others in the town is that the speed of traffic as it's entering Milton from the south, turning off onto Canton Avenue and sort of racing through town to get to the other end is significant, and that because Canton Avenue is a downhill run and twists and turns, that we really should focus our efforts on how to calm that, how to make it safer, how to make it feel safer, and so we introduced some concepts with respect to that, and those are all pretty much demonstrated on the plan. That's as far really as we've gotten.
So you, before you come back to the Historical Commission, you met with the Shade Tree Advisory Committee as well?
We did. We met with them once in July. We gave them, some of their members, a site walk. We're meeting with them again on Tuesday. Our arborist team is the same arborist team that is responsible for the tree and landscape preservation for the Eustis Estate, the Wakefield Estate, and some other significant estates in eastern Massachusetts. They are very highly regarded, and when we met with them, we were very impressed with their quality. They reviewed and really buttoned up the tree preservation plan. We're going back to meet with the, as I said, the Shade Tree Advisory Committee on Tuesday evening to hear their comments, and we'll respond accordingly. I will say that they were scratching their heads for a while, wondering what their role was here, because generally their role, at least under their charter, is to consider tree replacement in areas of town right-of-way. You know, town owns, there are trees all around town, and when trees are damaged or destroyed, how do you replace them, how do you protect them? That's really their charge. So they had to kind of warm to the notion that they were being asked to do something outside of that charge.
Was it your intent to have the arborist at one of the meetings
Yes.
coming? Okay,
Yeah.
so we'll come back to that then, okay.
Our intent, and we laid out a potential schedule of meetings that obviously this board would have to adopt, but we thought next week we would focus on utilities, stormwater, traffic, roadway design, that we would come back on the 29th with architecture, site plan, open space, and then following from there, some detail on construction phasing and construction management, things like that,
Where did you have traffic in there?
next Thursday.
So part of the utilities?
Yeah.
And I know there's been discussion about a site walk.
And we suggested that it would be helpful. You know, we went through a lot with really a board that was has been completely reconstructed since town meeting.
Not me.
Approval. Well,
Not
you were
Brian.
here. Brian was here. I think April was here a year. Denny joined the board just before town meeting. I know Rich is brand new, and so at a minimum, it has probably been 18 months to 2 years since this board.
And it's going to
members
be
of this
cold
board
when we get to go
have
instead
been
of
on.
90 degrees, and there might even be snow, right? So,
No ticks.
So our thought was maybe in the next couple of weeks, if it were available, we'd host a site walk, open to the public. So that was the idea, that we would deep dive
I'm
next
sorry,
week,
so the arborist would be coming when it's the architecture, the
probably on the 29th.
planning?
That's right.
Okay.
Could you run that over again? So next week is utility and traffic. What's
So-
the following?
Yeah, so we have meetings on the 8th and then on the 29th, so, and then the 13th of December, and then the 3rd of January.
So our suggested schedule was a broad introductory overview of the plan, major themes and issues tonight. Possible site walk this Saturday, obviously too late to post that.
We
but-
did circulate about the possibility of having a site walk on a Saturday on the 17th because of how it gets dark so early now,
Right.
in terms of people getting home from work.
Next Thursday, the 8th, would be utilities, stormwater, roadway design, and traffic. And we thought it would be helpful to match the availability of our consultants with Stantec relative to their comments and, you know, really deep dive on those issues. 29th would be broader, back up on the site plan, architectural, historic preservation, affordable housing. Actually, December 13th is when we thought we would have construction management, tree preservation, and following up on other issues that needed follow-up coming out of the earlier deep dive. So we know that coming out of next week will be 3 to 5 to 10 sort of questions that we need to respond to that will need to be parked, and we'll come back with further detail on. So a couple of things like that. And then, you know, we thought maybe the board, at the time we put this suggestion, we didn't understand that the board would not be meeting a second time in December. We thought December 20 we'd use for further follow-up, but certainly that would move into early January if that's necessary.
Okay, so, now, do
We
you
also
want to come
think a
back?
meeting, we're looking to meet with the Traffic Advisory Committee. Again, I think they meet next Thursday, earlier in the evening before this meeting. So we'll be meeting again with them. In particular, I think to have a little more discussion about this notion of stop signs versus yellow warning signs as you're approaching that Canton Avenue, Brush Hill Road intersection.
Okay. You want to go back now to the Historical Commission?
Yes. So, we had a series of meetings, site walk with members of the Historical Commission, with the commission itself, over the course of early July, August, September, October timeframe, in part to look at the details associated with the treatment of the three major buildings. We are pleased that they presented us with detailed specifications, if you will, for the exterior treatments of those three buildings. We agree that those are appropriate, and we look forward to advancing the design with respect to them. But they raised an issue of preservation of a fourth building that we think have had several discussions, and we think is inappropriate and ought not to be accepted by this board. And that is the Carriage House building, which is an old barn structure that housed carriages for the Walcott estate. It has been added to over time, and it's currently a dwelling, a residence that was converted, I think, in the early 90s, and it is occupied by one of the Carberry children. I think 4 of the 5 Carberry children live on the property in various dwellings, and Mr. Carberry himself lives in the manor house. Ken Jr. lives in the Devons. Dale lives in the Walcott. Another daughter lives in this house, and then another son lives in one of the other outbuildings on the property. The issue for us really goes to how the property was considered, how it was designed to be developed, how the development and plan changed through the course of the zoning process, and whatnot. The original plan was 75 units, fairly quick to cut to 64 units. After recommendation from one of the neighbors and a series of meetings with the Affordable Housing Trust, we came up with a plan to relocate the 6 affordable units off-site, so that 10% affordable, rounded from 64 would have been 6. When we take those units off-site, we reduce the total number of units to 58 on-site. And that was the plan and the development that we spent months with this board, with the neighbors and others, hashing out and arriving at a bylaw that was presented to town meeting. And that bylaw went to the selectmen in December or early January of 2017. The carriage house on this plan sits where this duplex was going to be located. The plan as it was developed, and as Alan walked you through the start, was all about preserving what is most significant to the value proposition for Upper Canton Avenue. And it's really about preserving these view sheds. It's the lawn, the meadow, the manor house, the things that you see when you're on Canton Avenue, and the things that you see as you step into the property. It was not, and it was about preserving dwellings that were significant. The Walcott house housed Governor Walcott and his family. Manor House is a significant structure. And for a long period of time, those were the only 2 buildings that were ever going to be preserved. In the course of that, the plan devolved to 60% of the property to be preserved as open space. We have geographic features, as we said, to pay attention to. You have the esker, you have the intermittent stream, you have wooded groves and other areas to be preserved. which really sort of tightened down what you could do with the property. But at no time was the carriage house ever considered. We met 3 times with the Historical Commission in 2016, obviously looking for their comments and support to the bylaws that was being developed, and the issue of saving the carriage house was never raised, and so it was never considered. The carriage house is actually the second largest building on the property. It's a big old barn, and it will be difficult to convert today to 1 or 2 units. And to think about saving it really forces us to sort of undo and redo a site plan that took months and months to arrive at. And so what was very significant, and I think Alan mentioned there were 12 units originally in the plan as it was going to town meeting down here. It's actually 10. We weren't saving the Walcott house. There was a duplex sitting on top.
Devens.
The Devens, I'm sorry. We were not saving the Devens house. There's a duplex that sits on top of the Devens here. There was a spur road that was going to come off with 2 duplexes above and 3 below. And that was the plan, and that was a plan that we fought hard over over the course of not just 2016, but well into 2017, when there was a strong push by many abutters to try and reduce the unit count from then 58 to something closer to 44. And I know I said over and over that the fewest number of units that would be built on the site would be 58. So we got all the way to the middle of town meeting. Town meeting started on May 1, Monday night, went Tuesday night, Thursday night. This bylaw came up on Monday the 8th. On Wednesday, we received an email that came from the neighborhood through Alex Whiteside asking to adjust the plan to do this. Save the Walcott house, the Devens house. The Devens house had been represented to us through a period of time, particularly Phil Bowden, who lives down here. He has, from his front door, an angled view under the foliage across the meadow, and he sees portions of the Devens house through that foliage. That was important to him. That was a comfortable thing that he saw. And so I think the idea coming through that last process was save the Devens house. Then the consideration was, okay, if we save the Devens house, what else do we do? Can we eliminate some of these units? You know, reducing the scope of the roadway, save some money, yes, we could do that. So we agreed to reduce from 10 in this location to 3. Now that's 10 units to 3 units here. 4 would go away, so the total number of units on site would be 54. That's 4 market rate units that would be gone. And 3 would be relocated somehow up into the upper area, squeezing within the 60% of open space that we agreed to provide, how much area you could fit. And so buildings where maybe there was a single here, a single over here, became duplexes or were relocated as duplexes. And so that's really from the site planning perspective of significance. Now the site plan obviously is adjusted, buildings have been skewed, reworked and whatever, but here was a duplex. That duplex there sits where the carriage house would be located.
Conversations continued from town meeting till now, till September, when the request was made.
So the carriage house is outlined here on this plan. It really steps in the middle of a cluster that was carefully designed to fit around the Walcott house. And it would force a complete redrawing of the plan and that location. We have to readjust grades, you have to do a lot of other things. There's an intermittent stream that's behind it to difficult to think about moving it, where would you move it, how would you move it, and whatnot. This is photographs from all sides. This, this is the front that you see. One of the things that we've done is we've borrowed from the elements, as Alan said, features of dormers and roof lines, the spire, cupola on top. We've adapted those into designs for other units, particularly a lot of the singles. And then the comparison of building footprints. The Devon's house is 2,200 square feet. It's a reasonable scale, single family. The Walcott is 2,400 square feet. The Manor House is 3,700 square feet. And the stables, this barn carriage house is 3,500 square feet. It is a big building, and it is built as a barn. It was not ever built, contemplated to be built as a building that would house units. Now, a portion of it is converted to a single family, but there's still a significant portion that exists as a barn. How do you redo that architecturally and meet modern codes? The roof line's gone. There's all sorts of things that would end up happening to that building to make it work and fit. So at the end of the day, we understand the Historical Commission's desire, but the first time we heard this was July.
July of this year.
This year. That's 14 months post grand deal, if you will, with the zoning.
Can I ask you another question? When did you first meet with the Historical Commission after the zoning? So not 2016, but...
No, we really didn't meet with anybody for close to a year. So we met with them starting in late June, early July.
It was the week after Memorial Day, yeah.
Okay, so early June. Okay, Denny, you have a question?
So when was the first time, when was the first time that the Milton Historic Commission saw this plan?
They saw,
Oh,
I
sorry.
think they saw iterations of the plan as we were working through the zoning process.
Of the carriage house?
Not anything specific to the carriage house, but there was never discussion about the carriage house. There's never been any intent to save the carriage house.
Has the Historic Commission been able to go inside the carriage house?
I don't think so. It's occupied currently.
Have you been inside it?
I have not
No.
been in.
That
So-
would be interesting to know the value of the inside. I know if somebody's occupying it, it's hard, but that, I would be interested to know, what condition it's in,
Right.
and what historic significance it has from inside.
I think in partial response to that, in looking at the three buildings that were, two that have always been on the intended to be retained, and the one that was added, as Ned described, part of our assessment along those lines always falls along, what can we do with it? How can we make this an attractive home for somebody in the context of the other homes, the neighborhood comps, for instance? What's left when we're done with it? And as we look at this building, and as Ned described, the footprint, really the size of it would dictate a duplex conversion, because its first floor plate would be so much larger than any other home in the neighborhood. And we have, the zoning prescribes our maximum finished square footage at 3,600 square feet. So all the homes are smaller than that. And this one has a first floor and then the second floor. And so as we thought about every building and where it sat on the site. And as we looked at this building, it's an attractive building, and we understand these thoughts and goals. But as we look at it and imagine adding garage capacity to the house for the duplex, 2 more garages or 4 total, adding and accommodating the necessary egress adding the sort of features that are expected as we look at what we're proposing for Devon's and Walcott, where those houses lack things like patio doors, access to their private outdoor space. We've proposed adding patio doors and ways to get to those spaces. That's been well received. As we would imagine adding patio doors and decks to this building, or patio spaces and garages. And what we found was that what we find attractive of the building isn't there when we'd be done. So how do we accommodate this sort of character on site is through what we do with the new construction and how we relate to the.
Can you go back to the plan that you have which juxtaposed the? Okay, so one of the things that,
Or juxtaposes the,
yeah, this is the plan that I was seeking.
okay.
I mean, as we said, and as we knew when this zoning was drafted, there were a lot of constraints put on the site development, and there are multiple goals. So saving significant historic structures, saving significant historic view sheds, preservation of trees, preservation of meadows, not doing a lot of cutting of existing topography, fitting in roads, et cetera. One of the things is that I know initially there was some discussion about doing on-site sewage, which would have taken more trees potentially. So there's some things have to push and shove or give and take. If you were to have to modify your plan now to do this, what do you see as significant of the other goals that we were trying to achieve might be impacted by doing this?
Well, first, to sort of go to the spirit of the zoning as it relates to preserving the existing homes. There's the stated goal that we also, is your questions help us relate, is preserving sort of the context around the building. So in addition to retaining the building itself, that, we'd have to determine what that envelope is. How much space do we give around this building in terms of what's the closest we could come with the next new building. And then so we'd be looking at, if we're looking at 2 units there in the place of 4, we'd be looking at finding a home for 2 units elsewhere on site. And the impacts to locating those elsewhere would be pushing harder into existing grade. For instance, here where we have 2 singles, where someone might eye a spot like that and say, well, there's room there for maybe another unit. We'd be really wrestling hard with the existing grade. We'd be really hurting ourselves against some of the character trees in this grove if we worked into either this space. We'd be cramping Walcott House in a way that we've endeavored not to do. So the spaces available are limited, and we'd be cutting trees, pushing hard into the grade, and/or crowding into the existing buildings, the historic context that we've tried to respect.
Okay, before we see if members of the public have questions for tonight, I'll see if other board members have questions first. Yes, April?
I have a list, mostly about traffic, no surprise. Our zoning requires that the scope of your traffic study be approved by the planning board. I don't think that's happened. Is that correct? Cheryl, did you approve anything on behalf of the planning board?
I have not.
Did you guys? Okay. So you mentioned the 138 scope. of work or the concept study that's underway with a construction date or a start date, is that listed on the tip?
Yes.
And it's programmed for construction in 2022?
Program on the tip, I think, for 2022.
And it's at 25% design?
I'm not sure where it is. We've met with CTPS and MassDOT to understand the particulars of that design, of where they are, but we do know that it's programmed for the tip.
Okay. Are you
Really?
involved with that, or, okay. So I have major concerns with the volume. I mean, you have your traffic study here already quantifies the level of service, Canton and Brush Hill with that westbound turn at a level F, and the queue is significant, and it only stands to grow in the build scenario. And while I appreciate the traffic calming and the signage, for me, that's not enough. I consider this to be a significant impact, which is called out in our substantial impact, I guess is how we define it in the zoning. So I would like to see more consideration of what can be done there. I'm not a civil engineer, but I certainly know there's a number of resources, whether it's picked up by your project or MassWorks or something else.
Excuse me, April, are you talking about the intersection with Brush Hill Road?
Yes.
Okay. So you're saying that right now it's a level F?
Yes.
Right, okay.
And it's going to stay at a level F with a much longer queue. And I can only speak from my own personal experience. I had to take my son out of swim team in Westwood because I couldn't get it from Glover at 3:19 to Westwood for 5 p.m. And most of that time was sitting here waiting to get through this intersection. And I think if this is going to be a much longer queue, it's going to have a significant impact on the people traveling in that direction. And they're not all from out of town. So I would really like to see some greater consideration of what could be done there. I know it's a tricky intersection, but I just don't think signage is enough. Does this trigger MIPA?
No. The thresholds don't trigger me, but no, don't come close.
25 acres? Disturbed land? Is that? Yeah, you must trigger
There's
some
MIPA
sort of review.
Right.
But not for traffic.
So, oh, no, not for traffic, I didn't
No.
expect, but for
No.
land disturbance as well, probably.
I think we're just under the 25 acres.
Do you have a strategy, when are you going to file with MIPA?
Within the next week to 2 weeks.
Oh, you have a filing ready, okay. Can we get a copy of your, it's in the NF
Yes,
license?
of course, yep.
Okay, I guess that's it for me for now. Thank you.
Okay, Brian?
Just staying on traffic for a minute. I assume Vanessa will be here for the traffic presentation? Great. So I'll likely hold most of my questions for traffic until Vanessa's present. Similar.
Contemplating a deeper dive.
Great. That's great. And I will plan to read it cover to cover. It's unfortunately something I know about. The focusing on that intersection again, I'd like Vanessa and maybe our own traffic commission as part of next week's meeting to think about any opportunities there to reprogram those lights. I know today when you're coming out of Brush Hill Road or Canton to cross 138, there's a common courtesy zipper that takes place there, and it works when people are commonly courteous, but as traffic gets worse and worse, the common courtesy is waning. So I would question whether there's any opportunity to program those lights to stagger and allow both a independent left turn, even if you had to shorten the light cycles. So it's just something I'd love for them to take a look at. My other
Address that,
yes.
that particular one. I know that the town engineer has taken and made a request of MassDOT to look specifically at that particular light for a left-hand turn off of Blue Hill Ave, off of 138 going north onto Brush Hill Road, which would then allow for some of the coming up Canton Ave having to go through the jug handle. It would remove some of that. It's not going to remove the people who have to come up and turn around and go back when they come out of the lots for the trail side, or they come out of the parking lot there. They have to come out, take a right, go up Canton Ave, take a left. If you were just going down Brush Hill Road, we asked for them to look at putting a left-hand arrow there. Again, there is a corridor study that is ongoing with CTPS right now, and it's under review.
Great. So I'd love to hear more about that with Giles and see what his thoughts are on how it may or may not improve this particular condition. The other question I have is with regard to the sewer connection. I don't know what we have by way of impact mitigation.
The town required the developer to use our consultant, Weston and Sampson, to do a capacity analysis of the sewer on Brush Hill Road and where it goes into the trunk line. The development did pay for that. The study was done, and there is capacity in that line for that.
Okay. And there's capacity with MWRA, I assume?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
There's also a fairly significant set of fees and infiltration and removal charges that get applied for new tie-ins.
So if that could, when you talk about utilities, if you could quantify that up for us, that would be really helpful, just so we can understand what's going on there and what's being contributed by this project. Thanks. That's all I have for now.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask one
Sure.
follow-up? So that I&I fee, that's to the town or to the MW? Okay.
Rich,
Yeah,
do you
we're
have?
tying, the
Sorry,
town
go ahead.
owns the sewer as it runs down Brush Hill Road. So it'd be, the I&I charge would be payable. There's a sewer connection fee, there's a sewer, this fee, there's a significant I&I fee that's paid to the town.
Great, and just when we're talking about that with the public, it would be great if your engineers can be prepared to talk to the public about what the I&I is and what it does and how that's applied. I
Right.
understand it, and I don't want to do it tonight, but if you could have someone do that, that would be great.
We'll either do it or ask John Thompson to do it.
Rich, do you have questions for tonight?
Not really, just one. I'm mostly interested in hearing from the public. But I will have more questions at
As we go
future
along.
meetings. Yeah. The only question I do have is more clarity. When you were talking about, you had mentioned originally 6 affordable housing units offsite, and then you walked through kind of the variations that happened after town meeting. There is no changes to the 6 affordable offsite though, correct?
That's correct. In fact, we, if, logically, you could have said that if you're going from 58 to 54, we'd have rounded down to 5 units at 10%. We agreed not to round down. We agreed to have the language read to calculate it to the next highest whole number. And so that would be 6, and the plan is to acquire singles and duplexes in neighborhoods around town, refurbish and sell them as affordable units, mostly within walking distance to schools and the like.
Denny, do you have further questions?
Yeah, could you show the sign with the intersections nearby?
The traffic?
The traffic,
set?
yeah. I'm concerned with the Brush Hill Road intersection that April and Brian mentioned.
Yes.
Okay.
So the
I-
intersection is
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, so, I live further down off of Brush Hill Road, and starting at 3:30 in the afternoon, it's a long slog up there, and if you're trying to come home, or to my home, you have to go right onto Canton Avenue and then go left and go through that intersection and go down. So adding 28 cars there is a a challenge. It's F-rated. Coming down further, though, I'm concerned about Hemlock Drive. I'm concerned that if you add that many cars there, you're gonna have people trying to come down Hemlock Drive. And I'm also interested in the construction management plan. You had mentioned signage. I'm just concerned, that's a very slow, walkable road. And I don't want it to become a rapid cut-through. And I'm also concerned.
You mean Hemlock
Yeah, Hemlock.
Drive becoming?
Yeah, if you're a construction vehicle and you want to go left, you're going to bog down 138 on traffic trying to come down So I'm concerned about those two intersections too, and the impact, because you know how it like multiplies when you have a problem. So I'm concerned about that for the residents of Hemlock Drive, but I'm also concerned about the impact that it will have on slowing down the traffic down 138 if you have people or construction vehicles trying to take a left. So I would suggest no construction vehicle signs there
Right, in terms of our, in terms of
on both ends.
in terms of construction management associated with vehicles coming to or leaving our site,
Yeah.
that's fine. I think we can, in the construction management plan, identify a preferred route for vehicles. I think the plan does say no deliveries before 9 or after early afternoon, so that the deliveries are coming to and from the site off traffic hours, off peak hours. So, yeah.
Could you also talk to the traffic committee about those two intersections and ask for any guidance on that? Because I can foresee that as an issue.
Sure, I know that people currently are using ways to come off of 138 or coming up Canton Avenue and turning back down Hemlock to jump 2 or 3 in the queue.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so before
Just that there's no light or anything to take a left turn. Further down there are lights, and that would be helpful, but there's no light. There's no light in Dollar Lane either. Is there? No.
There is a light
Oh,
here.
there's a light right there, yeah. Milton Street.
I think,
Similar
The
concern.
new corridor plan for 138 has them widening 138 for a sidewalk on one side, bike paths, a turning lane for onto Milton Street. So they retime that light, and it's to take and put a light at the Ponce Valley Parkway and Blue Hill Ave.
So can we get a copy of what the proposed improvements are to that, or whatever that plan is called?
Yeah, what stage of design are they at? Is this a concept, or have they designed anything?
They're not to 25% yet. It's the corridor study that leads to it.
So would your traffic engineer be familiar with that plan, and would they be able to give an overview to us?
Yes.
yes.
Okay. So can you put that on the agenda for that, please?
We should, sorry, we should make sure our consultant has that too,
He does.
and is giving it a look over to make sure that they're coordinated to the extent they can be.
Okay. Before we see,
Cheryl.
oh, Danny, I'm sorry, please, go ahead.
Thank you. Could we, Cheryl, could we explain to the public the peer reviews we will be doing? Stormwater engineer, will we be doing a landscaping?
We have,
traffic?
right now, stormwater and traffic,
Okay.
and that work has been done by, at least the initial work has been done by Stantec, and I believe if it's not been distributed, it will be distributed to the board soon. And
It's
then,
in your book from last week.
yeah, okay, it's in our book, this book?
Yeah.
Okay,
No?
there's a lot to get
I did
get
pass
through
it
in
out,
that
though.
book.
It's not in the book. I did pass it out the last time,
Okay.
last meeting.
You distributed last Thursday, okay. But the Stantec personnel will be here when the topics are discussed, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the peer review is usually required of this board. It's paid for by the applicant, and the town selects who will do the work. We had a lot of discussion in the past about who would do the work, and Stantec was selected with approval from John Thompson, the town engineer. And on the landscape on occasion, we have asked for peer review of that. I think we have a lot more information to gather from the applicant before we make any decisions about that. We certainly will be looking to the arborist report and understanding, what trees, how many of the trees are being saved and how many can't be saved. We haven't talked about new landscape and what that might look like, but we'll be getting into that. the answer for now,
Yeah,
Denny?
and will the traffic report and other reports that we discuss, will those be on our website?
They will.
Right?
And again, all right, I'm sorry,
That's
anything
okay,
else?
thank you.
Okay. One, I just want to make a comment on the design standards for the buildings. One of the concerns we had was about garage doors. And in some areas, I think a good job has been done, but in other areas, there's lots of predominance of garage doors. So I'm going to be looking at that more carefully as I look at the architecture and we get to when the architect comes. But I just did want to give you a heads up to my initial concern about some areas for that.
I do have one last question.
Okay,
before
go ahead.
we're
All
when we're
right.
done.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Okay. So, I didn't know what sharrows are, that term?
Sharrows are these arrows with bicycles lined on the roadway. There are some out there. We thought to add more because they would tend to narrow the area of the driving lane and create a safer area for bicyclists and calm traffic.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to now see if there are members of the public who would like to come address the board or ask questions of us or the applicant. Please come up and state your name and address, please. If there are very detailed questions, we'd like the applicant just to make note of them and not answer them tonight because we want to allow the technical advice of the consultants to have an opportunity, or those consultants to be able to answer those technical questions.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name's Kevin Walker, 1776 Canton Ave. I'm a direct abutter to this proposed development. I do have one question, and then I'll make a few statements. Who's going to make sure that the civil and the architectural and the other elements that aren't included in the peer reviews are going to meet the bylaw? I heard a lot tonight about development, but I didn't hear the bylaw mentioned a lot. And there's a lot of components in this bylaw that are clearly not in the proposal. We sent a letter to Mr. Dawley, the developer, back a few weeks back.
Mr. Walker, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, yeah, sure. We sent a letter a few weeks back to Mr. Dawley pointing out the Devon's cluster. Never got anything back. You heard minimal renovations to the Devon's house. Existing slate shingles being replaced by 3-tab. There's about a list of 15 items. There is no historic restoration rehabilitation plan for these buildings. Not one. Standard, nothing. So, let's take this board here. And the reason why this, I believe, is not to scale, how can the buildings be flat up by the Walcott house if you basically have a 3-story building in back? You have walkout basins with windows that aren't shown on the plans, no square footage that we see. So you're talking what you see in front. So there's no incremental grade change on these houses, on that street. It's not showing the correct grade.
So, sorry, Mr. Walker, are you referring to the ones that are right around the Devon's house? Or were you, the Wolcott house? I'm sorry.
This row here, that would be right here. I believe that is not showing the correct grade. And I don't believe it's 150 feet from this end to that end. No auto mile walls, huh? Well, on your civil drawing, you show a reinforced block retaining wall detail. Very hard to find the details that are marked on these drawings. This, unilock block. Now, sections. The sections they show are these orange details. I mean, the common sense would tell you, you want to see the sections here, here, and here. The plans aren't complete. They're not even, I was going to ask for a full peer review. You need to get a checklist from the developer, have him go point by point, and say that it meets the bylaw. Again, with the 3-story buildings, full walkout basement. I'm going to be looking at a row of these buildings, along with the new retainage pond at the entrance to my driveway. Same building, hip roof, gable roof, garage doors. All, you talk about garage doors, 12 directly in front of the Walcott house. Again, basement's not shown on plans, but look, windows and doors. Read the bylaw. If it's intended to be a basement living area, it needs to be counted. Very interesting. You get an email from Mr. Dawley. In the spirit and the intent, requirements of the town's zone binding law agreement developed to ensure consistency between the submitted plan application and my discussions with you personally, the neighborhood, so on and so forth. Exceptional, best-in-class land use and development plan for the property. Okay, I had to Google some of these words, but on this page are all the waivers that he's looking for. No granite curbs. Cape Cod berm. 10, instead of a 15-foot street light, which there are no details on, 10 feet. Instead of the pipe being down 3 feet, 1.5 feet. Loom, instead of 8, 6. This is a low-budget proposal that doesn't even come close to meeting the bylaw. Just look at his own rendering. Look at the garages, just like Woodmere. See how it's drawn? Those are 12 doors right there. Right in front of, it's Woodmere. Again, no basements, no plans, no cross sections, nothing that shows you the windows, the details that you're looking for. And that's why when you get a full submission, there needs to be a full peer review. We're talking, what, $35, $40 million of construction? This is a big job. And for the abutters in the town of Milton to get the value out of this and to make sure it meets the bylaw, there needs to be a full peer review. You know, the thing about a bylaw is when it says 550 feet from a street, that means Carberry Lane too. See this? They didn't factor that in. See, there's all this talk about the development. It's a bylaw that comes first. What's in that bylaw is what this development needs to meet. And you hear about, oh, we're going to need to rearrange. It's a Rubik's Cube. This is going to be, I grew up in a 3,000 square foot home in Brybrook Street, Milton. 3,000, it was a colonial. These are going to be 3,500 triplexes. The density and the mass, you have not seen the plans yet to understand what's being proposed. when I mentioned to Mr. Dolly that it's 550 feet, and I included this email, by mistake, I got an email back. And it was to, I think it's to Mr. Corcoran. Interesting screed. Not sure where he is coming from with the boundary line issues. I'll show you that. Though I am not worried. This is going to be a game of whack-a-mole. Certainly the 550 setback rule was not intended to apply to Carberry Lane, existing street. I hope that the emails between Danny Hill and us bear that out. At least, the very least, Danny should be able to testify that it did not amendment of the zoning at Fall Town meeting. That came to me. I've taken the high road here, and I'm going to continue to, because it's just property value. Drive up my driveway. You didn't hear him mention my name when they saved the Devon's house for the guy across the street. I'm going to be looking at, be like in Jamaica Plain, 35-foot high across. It's time we start getting into the plans here and look at the plans and see the actual impact on the property. You know, the Historic Commission, they were left out of it. In fact, we were against the developers agreement. But if you go to clause 15, it says you can do whatever you want. It says, this obligation undertaken in this agreement shall not be deemed to relieve the parties of any obligations to satisfy other applicable town regulatory process. Further, nothing in this agreement shall bind the planning board in its review and conduct of the special permit process, nor prohibit the planning board or town regulatory authority, so on and so forth. So what you keep hearing about is how hard they worked. Robust conversation, dialogue. The word is documentation. Spirit doesn't mean anything. Those words that are used here, I Googled a lot of them. Intent, it needs to be in writing. This is a huge project that can bring value. If it's not going to devalue my property, I really don't have a problem with it. Really. But this needs to be step by step. The developer should go through a checklist and say that my submission meets all these items. If not, he's wasting all our time. It's diversion, and I have to say, it's deceit. And I don't mind putting the time into it because I've learned a lot from this thing. And the more you look at those drawings, try looking at where the landscape, the details, the walls, culverts, concrete. It's not to scale. It doesn't show the features. Those aren't the trees. It's not accurate. Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate it, and everybody have a good night.
Thank you. I will reply to a couple of the things you said, Mr. Walker. It's the planning board's responsibility and jurisdiction to determine that what the application meets the zoning. And if we feel as if we need additional information to confirm that, then we will ask the applicant for it. This is our first meeting, and we intend to take as many meetings. The applicant has suggested a number, but the planning board will take as many meetings as we feel necessary to get all the questions answered, to get all the information necessary to confirm the conformance. There's a lot of information here for us to get into, and since the planning board just came off of a week of town meeting last week and a meeting on other matters, we have a lot of work to do to go through all of this, but we're going to do that work, and we're going to ask for the experts that we feel are necessary to help answer questions that we may have. So I want to assure you that it will be a step-by-step process. And if you feel as if there's more work that needs to be done as we work our way through, you're welcome to make those suggestions to us, okay?
Well, you didn't read my letters. I met you this morning here, not this morning, when I came in here, you said you didn't have time. How are you going to have time to study and analyze a $35 million construction project from a civil engineering standpoint and architectural. That's my concern.
I didn't say I didn't read your letters because I did read your letters.
No,
What
you-
I said was I didn't read every document that was in our binder.
Well, no one's replied to me. And if
Yeah.
we're talking about what we talked about in today's meeting, and not one reference to the bylaw or to a specific plan, and looking at that fantasy, I'm concerned. And I will keep up my concern.
So the reason that you didn't get a reply from me before is that this is the first that this presentation has come to us. This information was delivered to us 1 week ago. We did not participate in any other meetings because we have to act upon the application that we receive. And then that's why we asked for, let me finish, the report. And we're going to ask for the report from the Historical Commission. I see the chairman of the commission is here. And we will continue to gather and ask for the information. And we will get ourselves as up to speed as perhaps you are. That's our responsibility and our obligation as members of the planning board.
If I can just say one more thing. I never got a response per the developers agreement. I sent the letter off to Mr. Dolly, and per the bylaw, the application was supposed to be submitted with the parts, with the recommendations from the historic board. And I know for a fact, because I requested them and I didn't get any, so this submission is not complete.
We did receive from the Historical Commission just, I believe, within the last week, less than a week. And I'm sure that those could be made available to you.
No, it was the bylaw says before the application, they were supposed to go and include it in their application.
So they have met with the Historical Commission, and again, there's a lot more meetings that are going to come up and address every issue. I also want to make a mention of the developers agreement is something that this board is not bound by, and when it was done, it was something, when the zoning was being written, the developers agreement was something this board did not participate in at all. And we have no jurisdiction over that. It's purely the zoning that we have to work with.
Well, if it's purely the zoning, then why do we have to keep listening to about the last 2 years of putting this development together? Then it should be the zoning, and let's look at their application.
That's what we're doing.
That's not what I heard tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Walker.
Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else here who would like to address the board?
Hi, good evening. My name's Ted Phillips. I'm at 28 Hemlock Drive, just across the street. 4 things. When we get to traffic, yeah, I live it every day too. The problem is not in Milton. The problem are the lights down at Royal Street, and that backs up 138 all the way past Dollar Lane, backs Canton up all the way to Hemlock, backs Hemlock up from 138 to Canton every afternoon now. And people will wait on Hemlock for 10 plus minutes, and it's only 8 houses, 4 on each side. So, as we're traffic as well, or in construction vehicles, the development agreement, which I am still unclear as to who's bound by it and who enforces it, especially based on the last couple of comments, but within there is a discussion that all construction vehicles will enter and exit the property from the south on Canton Avenue and proceed directly to 138 via Brush Hill or come in from 138. There's no specific language in the agreement that says thou shalt not use Hemlock or Dollar, but again, that was the spirit. And orally, Mr. Dolly has stated that he would agree to that. I've also noted I'm now retired and happy to sit on the corner with a shotgun and ensure that that will be enforced. I don't think that was approved by any law group. Anyway, I am also treasurer of the Blue Hills Neighborhood Association, and in that capacity, the Blue Hill Neighborhood Association would support and endorse a more comprehensive peer review, both of the architectural, well, comprehensive, so, but including the architectural work as well as some of the road design. We too had concerns over the fact that while recognizing that these are not going to be town roads, the specs don't seem to be commensurate with town roads. Mr. Walker mentioned some of the specifics. The Neighborhood Association also would support looking at possible preservation of the carriage house. I will admit, within our discussions, we weren't fully aware it was an old barn. We knew it was currently inhabited. So I do now see maybe some of the complications, but I do think it worth investigating further, even recognizing the lateness of the issue in the project. I think that's it. Thank you.
Can I just ask
Sure.
you, when the last two comments about the peer review and the carriage house, is that something that the association discussed as at a meeting? or-
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so we had our annual meeting 3 weeks ago, roughly. And in that meeting, we spent quite a bit of time on the road construction, and also specifically about the carriage house as well.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Is there anyone else?
Did you describe what how the architectural peer review will work? Will there be an independent?
We haven't normally requested an architectural peer review. I think once we look at what we've got and have additional questions about, or if additional information is required, I would suggest that we not make an opinion or a judgment about that until we hear from the architect and we look at the information and see if we need additional information.
Okay. And what about the engineering?
The engineering, we have a peer review.
We have
Yeah.
that one
Yeah.
assigned, okay.
Is there anyone else here who would like to address the board? Okay, any other? Yes, Brian.
So, per the comments tonight, perhaps at the next meeting, we can have a staff presentation, which we have not had yet, as to how staff has looked at this application for completeness. And perhaps staff could also give us their take on, excuse me, conformance with the bylaws. Obviously, that's in our jurisdiction and our purview, but it would be good to hear what staff has to think about that.
I second those comments.
Okay.
Could I, it would be, might not be enough time in a week to do this, but I would be interested in seeing the staff's sense of waivers being sought as you go through the
I think
application.
the waivers that Mr. Walker referred to were not the zoning, but they related to the subdivision rules and regs, is that right?
Yep, and it's a lot of it has to do with the roadway design issues where he's talking, they asked for 6, we say 8. All these issues were brought up with the town engineer, and I'll ask him to address the waivers.
And just for point of fact, just Denny, if you look at page 2 of this package,
Okay, yep. I have that one.
requested waivers are outlined, so just
Oh,
wanted to
thank
give you that heads up.
Didn't
And
know that.
I'd like to point out that I think in my 3.5 years on the board, every single project has requested waivers from those rules and regs.
Bill, are we accepting this road? Okay,
No.
thank
No.
you, thank
It's their
you.
road.
Okay, thank you. I asked if the town was accepting the road, meaning does the town have to maintain it?
Won't be a public way. We won't be responsible for plowing the road. We won't be required to repair the road.
Will the stormwater be a responsibility of the association or the town? Maintenance of it? Association.
The association.
All right, so any further questions tonight?
Can we go on the stormwater one for 1 second?
Sure.
The stormwater does not come back out to the town, it's held on site. One of the peer reviewer comments was back to that particular issue, asking for more test pits in the, along Canton Ave on the property so that we can, we know that several of the test pits came back that they were all sand. It's just to identify that that is all sand in the areas where the detention basins are set to be.
Okay, right, because we did run into a situation on another parcel where they didn't do as many test pits, and the system, when it was put in, wasn't functioning properly. So that,
I know that our peer review engineer, our town engineer, and I know the projects engineer all agreed, and they understand the issue.
so when you talk about stormwater next week, can you talk a little bit about the structured versus the surface and what the characteristics of the surface would be like? I personally am interested in low-impact design, so if you could address, how much you're able to do with that versus structured, I think that would be useful. And then to understand what the landscape condition of that would be, is it just, would there be plantings like rain garden, or is it just a depression? So if you can just address that next week. Okay. Anything else? So no, they will be here next week, and again, the topics are utilities, stormwater, roadway design, and traffic. So you've heard some questions about some of that we'd like to have addressed. Any other thoughts about that? Those topics for next week? All right. So I heard.
Are we working still on the idea of a site walk on the 17th?
Does that work for members of the board?
Doesn't work for me.
Brian?
I'm in town.
Yeah, I can't do any Saturday morning because I have commitments with my kids, but
All right,
maybe I can do it some other time.
So with the.
What are we talking about for site walk here? I mean, we did a site walk here.
But we all weren't on the board at the time?
I understand, so.
If I may.
Yeah, please.
I've done a whole bunch. If we try to walk it, it'll be forever.
I hear that, yeah.
So what I have found to be productive is to put 5 people in my SUV and drive it, and I can get us to all of the important points, and probably do it in an hour. And then occasionally we get out and go in a building, or we get out and look at something in particular, but I'm able to come into Center Road, and go up the Manor House, loop around, get into the back fields and such. That has worked relatively efficiently.
Okay, so.
And if the weather's lousy and cold, it's even better.
So my thought had been after work would be tough because of the time this weekend, moving the clocks back. We'd have to be looking at like a 3 o'clock time, which is pretty early for
Yeah.
folks. But I suppose an alternative could be an early morning versus a Saturday. Or 2 different times, one on Saturday and one during the day, what would work for folks.
Right, I can split up my time and take, onesie, twosies, or threesies if you gave me some dates. On the 17th, we've been talking about the 8:30. My wife is in a craft show, and she has asked me to set up, and so I couldn't get here till 9:30. Sorry if that has screwed someone up, but.
Okay, so polling members of the board, do
I-
folks want to do a Saturday morning, an early weekday morning, or an afternoon? What would work?
I only have till 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning, I have commitments with my kids too.
And Denny?
I could do either.
All right, so April and Rich, since Saturday mornings are a problem, would afternoon or early morning weekday work?
Depending on which one, yes.
Yep.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
So I'm just trying to set
So
up,
depending on which date, yeah.
set up
In
two
theory.
different times, if we did a Saturday and
Yeah,
then.
you just get me some dates. I
And-
mean, I guess shoot them to Bill, and Bill will call me, and
We did.
we'll try to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to commit to set the 17th for an hour.
Yeah,
Um,
at
I
9:30.
think you know that trying to get me on a weekday is going to be virtually
Right,
impossible.
that's what, so that's why I
So
thought we
I
could
could come
split
on
it.
the 17th. and
I
then-
could do the 17th, so at 9:30 on the 17th, so you have three of us then, and then we can get the other two.
Okay, one of the things that I'm going to do that hasn't been suggested, and if I can ask you to crick your heads, you know, a lot of conversation about the 2 units behind the Devon house and how impactful and visible they'll be from different places. I will, I think it would be instructive and illustrative to provide a visual representation of the ridge of each of one of those buildings, whether it's a crane, a balloon, or some sort of staking for this building here in particular. And allow one to understand the top of ridge vis-a-vis existing Devon's house, and top of ridge vis-a-vis, we can go out here and see if we can find the top of that crane or lift or something like that. And I think it's easy to talk about how visible things are. It's easy for me to talk about how invisible they might be. A physical representation might assist you in making your own judgment.
And at which locations are you suggesting? And by the 17th, are you suggesting?
Yeah,
Morgan?
I was going to do it here.
Okay.
'Cause this-
I'm
this-
wondering about, there.
Okay. We're in the woods there, right?
That's why I don't sure about what you could.
Yeah, we can probably do something along the driveway right as
Yeah.
it crests out
Yeah.
into the lawn, yeah. It might not be smack dab in the building, but it'll be close.
Close is fine, I think.
I have to figure out what I'm gonna use, but I've done this elsewhere balloons don't work because, unless it's just perfectly still. But I'll put them out on Friday night for a Saturday night site walk, and then it'll blow in the night and they'll be gone. So probably be a crane or a lift or something like that.
Okay, great.
So
So,
I'm gonna
where should we
plan on
meet you
being
on the
there
17th?
at the 17th. Please come up the center driveway and park opposite Devon's house.
Okay,
And I'll have this plan, and there's 3 of you and me and Deb or Alan, one of the other designers, one of the designers with me, and we'll lap the property gracefully and thoroughly,
okay.
in under an hour.
Yes.
And just a reminder, there'll be no deliberations on site walk, just taking it in. And
If
you
there's
might
if there's
include-
anyone in the public that would like to get on the property, contact me directly.
Okay, and your contact information is available.
On my website and on your website.
Thank you.
May I move to continue this hearing and address a couple other quick things before 10 o'clock?
Yes.
So may I move to continue this public hearing to, right, thank you, November 8th at 7:45 PM.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Okay,
Very quickly, just going back for a second, I don't know, I think I can do this, because I don't think we're deliberating on it, but I had a request for the chair for the Thomas application. There's a request for a waiver on setbacks. Can I have that sheet back?
on fencing setback?
Yes. So I just want to have John Flynn, a request for John Flynn prior to the next meeting. I did find the language I was looking for.
I gave you the wrong one. That one.
So, the language in section E of the bylaw, I'll give you the right section. 4E of the bylaw states, fences and walls shall be at least 15 feet from lot lines, and landscaping shall at a minimum be provided in the area within 30 feet of the lot lines, provided that a driveway reasonably necessary for safe and efficient circulation of on-site traffic may be in this area. The word shall is in there. So
Okay,
I want
we'll
to find
ask
out if we have the opportunity to provide that waiver.
Okay. You gonna give back my memo?
What?
You gonna give back my memo?
Yeah, I think it's this one.
He's got you a stick.
Thank you. All right, anything else with that, Brian? No. I think that's it, so I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, hey.
Aye, thank you.